Gabriela from the band Rodrigo and Gabriela, and you are listening to LSQ Podcast.
Hey, it's Jenny LSQ. Thanks for pressing play on episode 107. I had the best time talking with the wonderful Gabriela Quintero of Grammy-winning psychedelic guitar duo Rodrigo y Gabriela for this episode. We met over Zoom recently and chatted about major moments in her creative evolution. Things like seeing an all-girl Japanese metal band when she was 10, or discovering Metallica thanks to the mixtape her sister's boyfriend had made as part of his romance strategy. Meeting her bandmate Rodrigo Sánchez at a local culture house where they grew up in Mexico City. And their adventures busking in Ireland at the end of the 90s, and how that helped kickstart their career, and lots of other stuff. Last year, Rodrigo y Gabriela released an awesome new album called In Between Thoughts, A New World. I was reading about the album and was intrigued by mentions of a particular ancient philosophy that informed it, and so that's where we begin. In Between Thoughts, A New World, I was reading about, well, some of the inspiration that leapt off the page at me as being intrigued about is this Advaita Vedanta stuff, which can you explain to me a bit about that and its connection to this group of songs?
The Advaita Vedanta is a very old philosophy that comes from India and ancient India, and it's just a very simple idea, but for some reason people try to make it super complicated. Advaita means non-duality, which means like one being, just one, let's say, one force or one intelligence that creates everything. Like it's some sort of like is dreaming us, so underneath all life beings and everything is this being that is organizing everything and all of that. So therefore it's the antithesis of nihilism, because nihilism is like separates completely. This is unifies everything. So when you can connect with that part of you that is part of the whole, that's where compassion, empathy, and all of those things, they come very easily without any effort. And that's what is Advaita really means, at least for us. And with the album came about when we're writing this music. Originally wasn't intended to be an album because it was during the pandemic, and as you know, it was the apocalypse going on, and so nobody knew what was going to happen. So we thought, oh, maybe this is the end. My lonely friends, this is the end. So for us was like a way to process all of the stress. Our big tour was canceled. We won the Grammy, so we were ready to go on tour all over the world, and then all of a sudden was like, wow. So came back here and we show up to the studio, and we were very busy in our social media sharing music, and eventually we start writing this music, but without knowing it was going to become the new album. So at the same time of all of this uncertainty and whatever, Rod got the COVID. So he didn't show up for like maybe 3 weeks. He stayed at home. And that's where he found this non-dual video. So he came back here saying a lot of things about the non-dual thing, and I'm like, what the heck is this non-dual? This because I knew the Advaita thing, but not the non-dual term, which is the Western term. So so he came, and it was a little challenging for me to listen to, oh, nothing really exists, nothing really it matters, and nothing really important. I was like, but what about those women in India? They have to carry all this water and try to feed their kids. Tell them that this is just an illusion, And I was, me and Rod were getting into friendly debates where we challenge, each other. Eventually, we find out it was the same thing that we always care about as a people, as a musicians, in our values. all about the compassion and meditation and all of these things. So we decided that because we were creating this music and talking about these things and breaks, we decided that the universe want us to to share this music as this with this message. That's me, but maybe you can ask Rod if he come back with a complete different answer, you know.
Would you say that that spirituality it has been a part of what you've bonded over as music makers since the early days?
And maybe at the early days we were more we like, I mean, we're old. So back in the 90s we were very young and we were just into rock and heavy music and all of that. And like, I guess when we started to go in late 20s, at least me, I've always been like a super anxious person, you know, like a squirrel. And we call ardillas squirrels in Spanish, ardilla. So that's how my sister said, an ardilla, because I'm always like AG Rod too. But because we were poor, we couldn't afford any drug, you know. So the only thing that really you can try is meditation and just big yoga and fucking ginseng or whatever. So that's how we started when we left Mexico and went to Europe. So I started really meditating to kind of calm down, you know, and also I loved alcohol back then. I don't drink anymore, but back then I was quite alcoholic, so that also helped.
So let's go back though to little baby squirrel you when you were just a little newborn squirrel in the world. When did you first start to feel attracted to music and arts and creativity?
I think since I ever remember, because I was born into a house of a family that it was like art lovers. Everybody in my family loved art, cinema, and also music from all sorts of like jazz, classical, Beatles, all the British invasion bands, and um, and then I discovered metal music, and also in Mexico we have all the what we call granny and granddad music, abuelitas, abuelito. That's like boleros and all of that music. So I was exposed to great music and art, and always me and my sister were always taken to museums and all of that. So I always loved it. I thought I was going to be a painter because I loved paint too and all of that. But then music, especially rock and roll and metal music, got me.
Yeah. So, I mean, were there other musical people in your family? Do your parents or grandparents or
Oh no,
anyone?
no,
No.
nobody. No, they just loved music and hearing and dancing and all of that, but no one played. And Rodrigo's family was different because his mom is a dancer. She plays the piano, and all of his dad is he was a great guitarist and a singer, and all his family they were great musicians. And even though Rodrigo never took lessons with them, but you know, you kind of get the idea. If you have somebody in your house playing a guitar, and to me that was like a dream, you know. I said I never got that. I never saw anybody playing that close in my house. I saw people play in the street or in the restaurant and all of these things, but never actually get to hear how a guitar was getting tuned and all of those things. So I discovered all of that when I was 16, and it's a different story. But for Rod, it was different.
So you were already obsessed with like metal and rock music before you learned to play guitar.
Yes, yes.
So what was your favorite, what were you most obsessed with? Did you get to go to see any of the artists you loved in concert as a teenager?
When I was really little, we always loved Beatles, and in my house, everybody's a Beatle mania, all the family. So I love Beatles, and then I love blues, and all of those things. And then we were like maybe me and my cousins, my sister, we were maybe 10, 11-year old, and it was Japan and Mexico celebrated 100 years of friendshipness. So they did a big concert at the Palacio de los Deportes, which is like an arena in Mexico City. And they took five bands, like punk from Japan, It was a punk band. It was another band that played like jazz, and it was a girls band playing metal. So when I saw like it was my first concert, and I was just I was blown away. And they were not famous, not for us, because and so that really was wow. And then eventually I listened to a few years later. I listened to for the first time Metallica. I didn't know it was Metallica. It was For Whom the Bell Tolls. That my sister's now husband, but back in the day was boyfriend, and he gave this romantic tape to her. So this music means so much to me.
Metallica was on the romance tape? Metallica?
It was Metallica. It was Bell Tolls. It was Master of Puppets. It was Ride a Lighting, Seek and Destroy. So for me, it was like, wow, this is incredible. And then eventually I knew it was a band called Metallica, etc., etc.
So then, as you were starting to say earlier, at 16, you began to learn to teach yourself guitar. Is that how it happened?
Well, I never actually uh, did any academic formation, but back in the day, I went to a little school and they taught me how to do G and like basic chords and all of that. But then I was like, yes, but I want to play like blues, and the teacher was like, nah, 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 stick to this. So it was for me super boring, and so I left. And then I never had money to pay for lessons. So back in the day, me and Rodrigo, we always listened to tapes, and it was like no YouTube, nothing like that. It can help you. We tried to get into a academic school formation, but we were rejected. So and just like that.
And how did you and Rodrigo meet?
We met through me and my cousin, my sister went to drama lessons when we were like 16, 15, and it was just a cultural house, and Rod's brother was director of that cultural house, and that's how we met. And then we came to, there was Sepultura playing like that December for the first time. They came to Mexico. I didn't know who Sepultura was, but it was like, okay, let's go. And that we couldn't get in because it was just like crazy. It was an early gig, like 10 in the morning. Everybody was super drunk in the streets and changed the venue at the last minute. Like, it's just super messy. So but me and Rod were like 15.
What sort of bonded you to each other at that point? Was music really sort of the foundation?
Yes, it was guitar. It was guitar. The first time I saw Rodrigo was he was playing the drums with his band in that cultural house, and they were playing Metallica's One, and I was like, "Wow, this is cool!" And they had a girl playing the bass, and my dream was to play in a girl band. So I saw her, and I was like, she was really good, and she was doing all of these Cliff Burton's things. I was like, well, so I approached. I said, "Oh, hello," and so eventually we both of us played together. But that's how I met Rodrigo and his brother Edgardo, who played the other guitar. Eventually, he played the bass. It goes all Mexican Spinal Tap. But And so when we met, Rod said, "You were a very good drummer." And he said, "No, I'm a guitarist, and we have this band, and such and such." And so we talked about our first meetings always were about guitars, and still about music and all of that.
It's sort of beyond obvious to say that you're both like virtuosos on guitar, and to think of that being completely self-taught and through practice and experimentation is really like amazing. Maybe you can't see it with yourself and can see it more with him, but like, how long did it sound terrible before it started to sound good? Like, because there's so much speed and technique, and it's just like it's a whole vibe.
Well, originally, the Rod and his band, and Rod's and his brother's band, they rehearsed in my house, and I didn't play with them at that time, but they were playing metal and things like this. Eventually, they never got a guitarist, and I knew all the music, but they wanted a guy. They wanted to look completely testosteronic and like Sepultura, like "Rrr." They didn't want to have a girl, and I really didn't want to play with them because they were boring for me, because at that time I loved to drink and do bad things, and they were just super good. They didn't drink, they always practiced, and to me they were boring. But eventually I joined into that band. I played metal for 4 years. But me and Rodrigo, we always jam with the acoustics. So for us, it was just a very serious thing. We were like 16, 17, and we practiced religiously. Like, we were very serious about it. Um, I don't think we sounded that amazing, but we always been that type of guitarist that we stick with what we played best. We don't try to do overcomplicated things that fall they don't sound natural. We always stick to what. If something sounded good to me, I stick to that, and Rod too. So we never try to be virtuosos for the sake of virtuoso. So eventually, when we left the band and all of that, and we stick to the acoustic guitars, I really wanted to. I really felt like I can do some rhythm. And Rod was like, "No, some shit. Play with the pick." And I'm like, "No." So I knew it sounded super shit, but I knew also instinctively that if I practiced enough and I played it enough, it was gonna become better. But it did sounded terrible for many months, and nowadays we still, like with music, you never finished. Well, you always evolving, and you can always push the limits and go to a different, like, get out of your comfort zone, always.
How did you find the way of playing and even just what to do with your hands to get the sounds that you wanted? Was that inspired by by any other players that you witnessed, or was it just trial and error?
Well, there's a lot of players in the guitar music world that they do crazy, great, amazing things. I'm not very knowledgeable about music and all of these things, but I know that in different cultures you get like a different percussion, especially flamenco. They do a lot of different rhythms. So I always I thought I can do that, but I don't know how. And I didn't, well, there was no YouTube and I had no money. So I always try to figure it out how the hell they are doing this. So I always got it wrong. But by getting it wrong, I discovered my own way to play it. So that's the truth. So
Oh, totally. And like there's no correct way, right? I mean, it's sort of even going back to that earlier, the Advaita. It's just sort of like if you're letting it flow through your hands, or if it works, it works. It's
exactly. And I think that's the valid thing. And the important thing for us was to be able to fulfill the sound for in front of an audience without the bass and without the drums. We wanted to make it feel that it was a full sound. And we used to, back in the early days when we play busk in the streets and then we play at the pubs and everything, we used to trade a lot. Like, I used to play a lot of solos, and then Rod played the rhythmics, and like that, back and forth. When we started getting invitations to do festivals, like summer festivals where people were crazy, we started in the most crazy Irish and Scottish festivals where people are super drunk, they're crazy, and they're just like this super high energy. So Rod said, "Don't play your solo. Keep doing the keep doing the kick and the percussion." So that's how I I end up being like the kick and the, like, let's say, like the drummer of the band, let's say. And that's how I started.
So when you were first like playing together and just kind of getting together and working on it and practicing, like how did that evolve into writing? And that the larger question is just sort of like also how does writing work for the two of you? Does it start out with jamming or do you work on things separately, etc.?
And nowadays we work on things separately a lot. Back in the day, it was more than listening to something, and then typically Rod would come up with a melody or with a riff, and then we took it from there. And then we started to kind of do um, the tempo, and then we do the also like the structure of the piece and working like that together. But typically all the first albums Rod came with the riffs and melodies, and nowadays it's different. And I write a lot of music on my own that one day I will release. And it's been a long time because I got into a comfort zone of playing the rhythms, and I forgot to practice solos, arpeggios, riffs, and all of what guitarists do. So 3 years ago, I started like again from the beginning, and it's been quite a trip, but it's great, you know. So I love it, and I feel happy to come here, show up, deliver, so we both create together.
So, I mean, I know we're here to talk about Rod and Gab stuff, but I am intrigued about this idea of kind of a folder of tunes that you're working on for that'll maybe be something else. What have you found is inspiring you? You know, what to make those songs?
To me, there's many things that are super inspiring. I don't know you, but for me, I feel uh, I call this society the cube, you know. So the cube says that at certain age, people is no longer happy, or you know, the cube is like the matrix. And for me, it's like fuck that, because I really feel like I'm 50 years young, you know, and I feel happier than when I was 20. I used to be so miserable, and nowadays it's like, who cares? No one really cares. So because I love music and I love nature, so I think personal values would be nature, animals, a vegan, a nice one, and and my project is related to those themes. So I've been writing a lot of music that inspired in the birds here, for instance, in this place where we live. There's so many beautiful birds that come from Canada and freaking Alaska and all of this. So it's quite magical. It's a beautiful place that it needs to be preserved. And I think art is a fantastic way to inspire people instead of just, I don't know, there's other types of activism, and a lot of people they're doing great work, but I think artists can also be part of those changes and part of that inspiration. So to me it's important with one guitar being able to play the melody, the rhythms, the arpeggios, the tunes, the themes, and being able to sit and play, you know, just with just one acoustic guitar. And that's my goal. So one day.
Why did you guys go to Ireland? What made you kind of take the project to Europe for a while? Because for listeners, that ended up being a great decision for Rodrigo y Gabriela because they met Damien Rice over there in Ireland, and it kind of kicked off everything in a way.
Yeah, what originally was from the band. It's important to give a little bit of a context where we were at emotionally. We felt drained with the metal band because it was a complete Spinal Tap Mexican version of it, and we're so internationally non-famous, and we just want to grasp for something to get attention, to be recognized, to be all of these things. So and then eventually we just give up that idea, and we with me and Rodrigo especially, because we were the youngest on the band. So we said what we wanted, what exactly we want, you know. And so one of the things we really wanted to do back then was to travel the world and to get to know the world. And the other thing we loved was play music. So we said it's good we can quit the band, because the band doesn't mean we're gonna quit music. And we can also quit all of these ideas of I wanna be famous and I wanna be recognized and all of these things that were draining us. So we left all of that behind. We changed the electric guitar for the acoustic, and that's how we end up here in Zihuatanejo, which is a tropical Pacific, South Pacific near Acapulco. And so we the plan was to come here, play, and save some money and go to Europe. Why Europe? Because Europe is far away from Mexico, because there's different countries in just one territory that you can change. In our heads was like, oh, we want 1 week to Holland, the other week we go to Belgium, the other week we go to France, and we can play. And we thought it was gonna be super easy. So it wasn't. But so the first place decided was going to be Ireland, because we didn't know anything about Ireland. And uh, and then a friend, we met one woman like 2 weeks before we bought the tickets to Europe, and she was from Mexico and she lived in Ireland for a while. So she said, "Oh, you should go there. You can play there in the street." And we thought, "Ah, that's not for us. Now we play at the restaurants, at the fancy restaurants. We're not gonna play in the streets." And we thought we could have done the same, like play in a fancy restaurant in Ireland, like Mexico, but it wasn't like that at all. It was very different, and it was really cold. So we had to play in the streets. And but yeah, that was Ireland was like completely out of the blue. Why not?
So you get there, you don't know where what you've never been there, you don't know what's what. How did you figure out where to play? How did you figure out what was sort of the trajectory of figuring out how, like, okay, so we're playing outside, that is the deal. How did you make the best of it and kind of use it as a strategic thing?
Well, this is when I think life can be very magical once you decided what you want to do. I think that is very important, because at least in my head, in my life, when I don't decide, everything kind of gets like kind of frozen. But when you decide what is it that you want, the universe, it is gonna push you to the limits, but it's gonna help you, and you need to trust that. That's my experience. So for us to arrive there, we didn't speak any really English. Rodrigo was better than me. I didn't speak any English. And Irish English is very different. So even for Americans, it was just like a headache living there, because it's very different. So that was the first thing, was like, whoa, what are they talking about here? And then the second thing was, Dublin is a very small city. You can actually walk all the center. You can if you like to walk, you can walk, no problem. So it wasn't difficult to find the street, which is called Grafton Street, where all the buskers are, and it's a lot of people. It gets very busy, but it was scary. So we didn't know. But then we were walking the street and we were quite worried, like, what the hell are we doing here? It felt almost like a dream, like a nightmare. It was very exciting, but also like we ran out of money in the first week, so we had no money. So we had no choice. And we also promised ourselves, that was one of the things we decided, to to play music and not to do anything else. So we needed to trust that. So we were walking down the graphics on the street, and all of a sudden, I start to hear a guitar and a very familiar sound. I said, I know that tune. It's from a composer from Cuba called Silvio Rodriguez, and it's a song called Ojalá, which means Ojalá is like I hope, or something like this. So I started to recognize it. What is this? So we walk, and there was these people surrounding this guy, like a sort of Rastafari guy, playing this Silvio Rodriguez tune. And then we walked in, and he looked at us, and in Spanish, Mexican and Spanish, he said, "You are from Mexico?" I was like, "Yes." So he told us exactly what to do, where to buy a little amplifiers, how to charge them, how to do the business, to go and play in the streets in Mexican Spanish. So that's, to me, that was the universe just saying, okay, here it is, trust, and you'll find the solution. And then the next thing was to go there and play there was, to me, the most horrible feeling like before playing. It was very, because we walked there and sat there, and people looked at us, and for me that was like, no, no, don't look at us. Ignore those, please, because for me it was just, I was very shy, and when we play here in the restaurants, no one really cared because it's background music. But on the street, it was like a mini gig. We got a lot of people watching us, and it was great. So every time we went there, it was, at the beginning was hell, but once we finished, it was just like, wow. you know.
Yeah, because I can imagine. I mean, how at a certain point, like it just must have started to feel like, oh, this is people like that. Where this feels good, and people are responding to it. Like, do you remember sort of when that started to dawn on you that, like, no, we're doing it, and this is the thing. This is what it sounds like, and people are responding.
Yeah, but it was that very first Saturday that we went there, and we sat in a little amplifiers, and we opened our guitar case, and so we started playing. We did like a mini set of 45 minutes nonstop, and I didn't want to look, but then I started playing like this, and I started to notice a lot of shoes around us, a lot of them. And then it was silence. And that street, which is usually very busy and noisy. And then we finished, and we got this clap. It was like, am I dream? Am I dreaming? And then we have a lot, at that time was Irish pounds, and they were just this big coin, silver coin. And so we have a lot of those, and then people were, wow, you're amazing, blah, blah, blah. I said, you're from Brazil, and no, we're from Mexico. But Irish are like, oh, Brazil, whatever. And they asked us to play another one, and then the police came in and said, you have to move immediately, you cannot stay here because you are blocking the shops. And then all of the people were like 100 people around us, they were like, woo. So it was epic. They said to the police. So, and then we finished that day, and we were crazy because we met so many people. They invited us to the pub, and I discovered Guinness, and I loved it. So every time we play in the street afterwards, that's how we met Damian Rice too. We went for a coffee or a beer. So it was a complete, incredible time.
And at that point, you hadn't yet recorded any of your songs, right? When did you start to think about like making an album?
Not at that time. What we knew back then was that we didn't want to play any more covers, because when we were doing here the fancy restaurants and the weddings and all of that back here in Mexico in Zihuatanejo, um, that when we went to Dublin, we wanted to play things that we wrote. So, and we got one little tune that it sounded a little bit more Latin, and every time we played it, people was like clapping more, gave us more pounds, and we thought, oh well, we should keep pushing to keep working on new music, and as long as we're doing our own music, we don't care. We can still travel and playing, and who cares? We didn't care. We were very young. We didn't care about anything else. This was the summer.
How long was that? How long was that phase of where it was playing on the streets and busking before you were like, okay, we've graduated from that now and we're going to book real shows?
I think that was maybe that summer was that summer, probably 3 4 months, and then we got offers to play in a lot of parties, And it was a Celtic tiger back then, so the economy was going crazy, and so Irish were spending money, and they saw they thought these guys, they're like a cockatoos from Brazil and they play guitar. We want them in our party. So they bring those everywhere. And so that's how we, even though it was our own music, we're still playing all of those gigs like parties, pubs, coffee shops. And we didn't had a plan because every plan sounded like the metal band, like, oh, we want to become famous. So we avoided. We were just more happier in a hippie-ish way of no rules and crazy stuff. We met Demian on those months, and he was pretty determined to record an album, to become an artist. And we thought, oh, that's weird. That's and like he was just pretty determined, and he invited us to open up for him in a very important gig for himself, which all the Irish music industry was going to be present, and of course all the United Kingdom journalists and all of that on this in this venue called Vicar Street. So we ran into Damien after a few months not seeing him. Ran into because Dublin is such a small place. I said, "Oh, hello, what are you doing?" And said, "Oh, you guys, you wanna play tonight? Please play tonight. It's gonna make me so great tonight. It's a very important night." La la. So we said, "Sure." So we went there and we did support for him, and so all we didn't know that all of the people that were there is it was the media, the labels, the all the creme de la creme. So we got in touch with a few of those people, and we decided to say, "Hey, we like to do this." So we got our manager there, and we met him there, and then we started to do proper. He put us at the first tour, which an Irish little tour, a regional tour, and then it sent us to the United Kingdom, to Europe, and then go to America. So it was like that.
Yeah, then it's off to the races and it's all happening.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So then once you're at the phase where you're definitely going to be writing a bunch of originals and recording the originals, did you explicitly talk about kind of where to take your sound or what the sort of, what you were striving for in terms of your own unique sound?
Well, for us, it was back then. It was very important to be acoustic acts and instrumental. At the earlier days, we got a lot of different people and different opinions about it, and said, "Oh, you should add a voice because a radio-friendly tune also is good if you have a radio hit, or if you work with these DJs, or if you do this and this and this, and that's how you can become like well known and better because all guitar-y things is just too guitar-y and all of these things." And me and Rod back then we very much so that sounds like the metal days. So we said, "No, listen, this is us. This is what we do, and we like to create this sound like which is acoustic." But if different people thought always these guys played flamenco, we never play flamenco. It's a completely different thing. It's more into rock, and it has Latin influences, but not particularly all the flamenco things. So um, we said we'd like to create this sound with two acoustic guitars, and if people like it, great. If they don't like it, great too, because we're not gonna pretend. We just want to be something we're not, kind of thing. And so we stick to our guns like that. And then we found that people liked it. So c'est la vie.
Yeah, yeah. And from there, what would you say were the other kind of key moments when you felt like, sort of like that moment playing busking for the first time and seeing all the shoes and you're like, okay, we're doing it, it's happening, like where you felt that something new, you were sort of leveling up in terms of what you were able to achieve artistically? Like what sort of albums in the catalog to date have felt to you guys like you're like, no, we're going somewhere else now, this is an important moment?
At the very first albums, we kind of got surprised by the results. It was not an intention of sounded particularly like somebody. Early in the day, our guitar heroes were Al Di Meola, John McClathy, Paco de Lucia, and all of those. But those guys are they're truly incredible. So we thought that we cannot be them, you know. So we can do uh, our own thing, our own merge with the two guitars and be able instead of do like the typically guitar duo that one does a solo and then the other one they do jazz standards and they answer with each other. We we wanted to create something that it was blending the two guitars into a sound and more of a rock like a band format. So artistically that was new and that we were proud of that even though knew this is never gonna be like friggin' big cubic artist that is gonna sell zillions and gazillions and all of this. We don't care because as an artist I think it's very important that you are doing what your soul wants. Soul first. Soul first. And that's a lesson that is always every time we want to kind of flirt with other ideas. These soul first comes in the most unexpected ways, giving you lessons and said, don't forget, because that's how people, your fans, your core fans, the true heart of your fans, love you for. And when you do those things, it's like almost like a betrayal, you know? And I think part of being happy and authentic is just, okay, maybe only two people like what you do, but at least you are genuine, you know? And that to me, that's super important.
Yeah, because I would imagine once things started going well and like better, I just want to say I love cubic as the way of describing. Now that you've explained what the cube is, I know what cubic means. But there must have been moments when it started going well and better than you thought it would, where you slipped back into that frame of mind of thinking, no, we're popular, we're getting popular now. How do we get more popular? Or
Exactly, and especially people around you, they want that of course in a good intention, you know, like that. Oh, let's push it to the let's want more, you know. Let's be more and then strive for more, and then there's this addiction of like you get hooked by it, you know, and then you want more and you want and this like what wait a minute. Here artists were supposed to be givers not takers. We give we share the stage, we share the moment, and then we're present for whatever comes from the ethers through us. We share it to people. That's what we are supposed to do. But when you are trying to be strategic, when you're counting how many likes, how many dislikes, if this other band sold less than you, all of these things are toxic for an artist and for the work. And I think that's ultra important to know that you are enough as an artist, that you're worth because people like what you do and enjoy what you do, and it has significance for them, for you. And I think to me that's a blessing, you know, nowadays that we passed that period of become super popular and now we're in this program and now we're having dinner and there's this such and such names and all of these things, which is cool, nothing wrong with that, but it's just don't lose yourself. Don't lose your soul. Your soul is still there, you know.
yeah, and I mean, of course, applause feels good, and then you get this rush from it, and you want to chase that feeling or more of that feeling, and then you remember that the better feeling is just doing authentically what you are getting the applause for. Do you? I mean, between playing live and working in the studio or working and playing guitar on your own, like what feeds your soul the most?
Well, it's music, but nowadays also is the connection with anybody, especially with my family. After many years of being on the road for 20 years, I lost the weddings, the baptisms, the everything, the divorces. So I've always been on a plane, always been on the stage, always been. So nowadays, to reconnect with my family is very important. Also, to work in a community is very important. Here in Zihuatanejo, 10 years ago, me and my sister started a non-profit organization here that is dedicated to all the um, sort of local, consume responsibly, and also good food, healthy food that you can grow in your garden, and all of these things has made us being in touch with great people that are always working towards making this place a better place for the kids, for the education, and all that. So that community is beautiful, is thriving nowadays with new generations. So there's a lot of great things going on here that before 10 years ago you would never ever dream about, like here in this part of the world, which is a state of Guerrero, which is most forgotten state in the whole country regarding for their governments, regarding education and health issues and all of those things. So in this little community we have a lot of girls writing, and they're giving workshops, and they're publishing things, they're podcasters. There is also, I am part of the farmers markets called Ecotianguis, with which have cultural, every Saturday has a cultural program with music, live music, book readings, workshops, psychology speakers. So it's just very rich, and that's also very important because just connect with your neighbors, with the people that surrounds you, and all of that, you know. So it's creating the world I want to live.
Well, lovely to meet you, and I hope to see you IRL somewhere outside of the cube, you know?
Absolutely. Well, I love to be outside of the cube.
Thanks again to Gabriela for that conversation. Rodrigo y Gabriela are on tour right now. You can get details at rodgab.com. And thanks so much for pressing play on this episode of the LSQ podcast. You can find others on all the platforms and at jennylsq.com. Reach me with questions and feedback on socials at jennylsq.